Hello everybody, John here, and today onto the garage we're doing another Secrets of the XK8. Welcome back regulars, and if you're new to this channel then we play around in the garage tinkering with all sorts of cars and vans and toys, but by far my favourite thing in the whole wide world is the Jaguar XK8. So if you're into this sort of thing, consider subscribing to our channel. The Secrets of the XK8 series is now into its hundreds of episodes, and today we're going to take a quick look at the secrets relating to ride height. And I'm also going to give you a little heads up for a saga yet to come. The Jaguar XK8 XKR X100 series of cars is a large, low-slung sport/GT car produced from 1996. A design that was revolutionary and yet harked back to its predecessors, including the E-Type. This car has long had a reputation for appearing rather high and tail high in its standard stance. For a car with sporting pretensions, it certainly does have generous ground clearance, but it's not as big as most people believe. It's actually 18 centimetres, and that's measured from the ground to the seam that we use as a jacking point to lift the car. It actually gives the impression of a much higher ground clearance than it really has, due to what's called fuselage styling. So the bodywork actually wraps underneath and curves under the car. And vehicles coming out around the same time were very much more slab-sided, and they might carry the same ride height in terms of bodywork to ground, but that bodywork comes right out to the side of the car. Whereas to find that same point on this, you're reaching in a good 6 inches or 150 mil underneath the vehicle. The tucked under look gives that impression of extra height. Viewed from the rear three quarters, this is massively exaggerated and it looks almost off-roadish in its ground clearance. And yet that is just a few centimetres different to our truly sporty and quite low Bath, which stands at 14 centimetres. But this shows its height correctly from the three quarters because the bodywork is out at the edges. It's rather more slab-sided compared to the Jag's fuselage styling. People often also comment on, yeah, they're all right, but they always look like they're jacked up at the rear. Now, the ride height gap between bodywork and ground is constant if the car is set up correctly. What causes the effect of looking high at the rear is actually the rear haunches. If you look above the rear wheel, they are quite high on a rising styling line, and that's regardless of coupe or convertible. Plus the rear bumper is very unique on the XK8, and even more so on a very early car like my Mark 1, where the rear bumper is not only rising like a wedge, but is tucked underneath the car. It's actually narrower than the bodywork. All of which conspires to give a look where a car is jacked at the rear. If you look at the gaps above the tyres, then they're actually very constant. That said, a lot of Jaguar XK8s and XKRs genuinely are low at the front, high at the rear. And it's the emphasis on low at the front. And the low at the front issue is not to do with the springs generally, it's to do with the top spring seats or spring mounts. So if we go under the bonnet, and if you remove your cover, you've got this strut mount. This big metal plate, the black part, it extends out right round here and has got a quite complex sandwich of rubber and metal parts that we can see just the centre of here. The rubber or foam degenerates over time, getting softer, breaking down, eventually crumbling, and reduces the ride height on the front. And this is the biggest contributor to ride height change, not generally the springs. A 5mm change in the height of this stack, because of the suspension geometry and how far inboard this is compared to where we measure this gap, will be amplified at least ×3. Many people actually assume that the XKR, the supercharged and therefore faster version of the X100, is much lower. Typically it's not so, it's exactly the same ride height. The change in visuals is usually achieved by a larger diameter wheel and low profile tyre, giving the impression of a lower car. Plus later models than my early version having sill extensions, which, as we spoke about before, tend to give a lower look. A few limited edition models were actually lower, specifically the 4.2S, but they're only lower by 10mm. So how high should these be? The front ride height should be 400mm, which is 15 3/4 inches when the car is fully fueled, and 401 when empty. Obviously not a lot of weight effect on the front wheels. That dimension is always taken from the centre of the wheel to the apex or high point on the arch. Why not from the ground? Because tyre pressures would affect it, and because although very similar, if you've got a different wheel set, the rolling diameter is subtly different, even from tyre to tyre and tyre wear, whereas from the centre of the wheel to here is unaffected by those things. So how high is it on mine? I've got a very old, 27-year-old in fact, XK8. It's in very good condition, but it's not had its top mounts changed by me. I do suspect they have been changed at some point in its 27 years of life, because the rubber does not look too bad when viewed from the top. So if we want to check ride height, it's 395 at the front, as opposed to the 400 that it should be. So it's about 5mm lower than it should be. Every time I get my nice tape measure out, people ask about it, so just to cut all that off, it's called a Stanley Panoramic. It reads like a conventional tape on this surface from here to here, but if you want to measure from here to here, the back of the tape, it has got a slightly distorted scale which starts at a different position, enabling it to read on the outside. So very nice tool. I once saw a friend of mine using it at a train factory. Hi Rob Lumley. And as soon as I saw it, I rushed out and bought one because so useful. And the rear should be 405, so literally just 5mm higher than the front. And he's reading 404, so it maybe lost 1mm over 27 years. That's pretty good. So what we're looking at here is a car at its correct ride heights. If your car is completely dry, empty of fuel, nothing in the boot, then the rear dimension is 416. So there's a 10mm rise with an empty tank versus the full tank, which is what I've got at the moment. So for viewers in America, I will say that the correct ride heights laden, so fuel in the tank, 15 3/4 inches at the front, 16 inches at the rear. The ride height is not adjustable if you have standard springs and standard dampers without adjustable seats, etc. But you can get coilover style dampers for these and adjust the ride height using a C-spanner if that's your thing. I'm going to be doing some work on the suspension of my car, which will actively change the ride height, and that's coming up soon. So stick around for a few seconds and I'll just give you a preview of what I'm going to be fitting. But for those of you who just like the secrets, see you soon. For those who'd like to stick around for everything on To The Garage, just a quick reminder that our photo competition closes at midnight on the 31st of July. So if you want to enter a photo for this competition, by the time you see this video, I'm going to guess you're only going to have 1 or 2 days remaining. So it's a hard stop, midnight on the 31st of July 2023. If you send in a photograph to john@tothegarage.co.uk, make it landscape in format, and tell me your name, where the photograph was taken, and any details you want to share about your car. If you don't want the number plate on show, if you're unlucky like me to have a front number plate, then obscure it yourself, digitally or otherwise, because I will use the photographs completely unedited in the photo competition. If you want to know more details about the competition, go look at a video about that. My next saga, meaning it'll probably be broken into several videos because I don't work fast, is I'm going to do some restoration, renovation and improvement on my suspension. It's not a complete rebuild. What I'm doing is I've always liked the idea of a slightly lowered XK8. It can obviously cope with it. There's a lot of ground clearance there at the moment. And I want to see how she looks and performs on lower ride height. I'm not going to go mad. So I've bought myself a set of upgraded lowered springs for the XK8 XKR from Adamesh in the UK. And those are rated to give a 25mm or 1 inch reduction in ride height. So significant enough that the visual effect will be really obvious. Not such a big drop that it's going to dramatically alter where I can go and not go in the car. It should give quite a change in roll centre and therefore how the car feels around the twisties. I've also got myself a brand new set of Bilstein shock absorbers for all 4 corners. I have a non-CATS car, so that means I don't have active suspension, and hence it's a bit cheaper for me to do this than if you have active suspension. And I have a brand new set of top spring mounts. And there's all sorts of controversy about these because the genuine original Jaguar supplied ones are like hen's teeth to get hold of and really expensive if you can. Aftermarket ones seem to suffer from all sorts of issues. I've got an aftermarket set. I've sourced mine from British parts, and I'm going to see what sorts of issues I have. But these will no doubt raise the rise height just a little. These will lower the ride height just a little, and there's nothing wrong with my dampers except they're 27 years old, so these will probably give me an improvement in how cushy and damp the ride is. hopefully you're going to join me on the journey to fit and test all of that. And that'll be coming up as soon as I can. Don't hold your breath. I've got to sort out the photo competition. I've got some work to do and some other bits and pieces, but got the parts, starting to roll on that very soon, and the video should start to pop out regularly. Be good, everybody. See you soon. If you're enjoying our channel, then don't forget to subscribe and click the little bell icon so you get notifications of new videos. And please give us a thumbs up or thumbs down, and you can share the videos. And below the video is always the area where you can comment and get involved with the chat.